Okay, as we go through our second sermon from Thriving in the Valleys, today our lesson is Thriving through the Valleys through Contentment, a lesson from Paul. Last week we had a lesson basically from Elijah. Today it's from Paul. If I just had a little bit more, how many times have we thought that? Bigger paycheck, better job, healthier body, a different season of life. We live in a culture that runs on upgrades, new phones, new cars, new houses, yet somehow the more we get, the less satisfied we feel. But you meet someone who has almost nothing, and yet sometimes you see, if you're around them long enough, they actually radiate peace. I remember hearing about a man named Horatio Spafford who lost his fortune in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. And then in 1873, he lost his 4 daughters in a shipwreck. His wife sent a telegram telling him she was the only one in the family who survived. Her message was, "Saved alone." Horatio then sailed to meet his wife. And it is said that as his ship passed over the spot where his daughters had died, he wrote the lyrics to probably one of my favorite hymns, "It Is Well With My Soul." I love that hymn. In the middle of that grief, he penned this still popular hymn. How? How could he do that? How could a person walk through the valley and still sing? That's the question Paul answers in Philippians 4:10 through 14. Today we're learning from a man in a valley. Today we're going to unpack how Paul thrived in the valleys, not by escaping them, but by finding a deeper source of strength. Paul is confined. He's writing while under house arrest, chained to a Roman soldier. Resources are tight. He's chained and uncertain of his future. And yet he writes about a kind of steady joy that doesn't blink in the dark. Yet through it all, Paul says he's learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. He calls it contentment. Now, this isn't a motivational slogan. It's not a personality trait. It's not denial. It's not pretending. It's a spiritual skill that can be learned and practiced and lived. A learned Christ strength, steadiness that holds in every season. Are you in the valley? Do you want to learn to thrive in the valleys of life? Join me today and you will discover how to thrive in the valleys by embracing contentment. We'll be with Paul in Philippians 4:10 through 14, but we're going to begin with just verse 10. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, and now at last your care for me has flourished again. And though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Philippians 4:10. Which brings us to our first point today. Hello. Contentment begins with a grateful heart. Grateful. In our text, we observe Paul writing under house arrest, chained to a Roman soldier around the clock. The chain was a single short length of chain by which Paul's right wrist was fashioned to the soldier's left wrist. This was a Roman custom for prisoners awaiting trial before Caesar. I don't know about you, but I'd have a difficult time rejoicing about much of anything if I were in that position. I am right-handed. I think it might be a little difficult for me to write Chained to a soldier? Yet here's Paul talking about his great joy, and how could this be? He is in one of his deepest valleys one could find themselves in. Paul makes a decision, though, to be content in all seasons of life, both the peaks and the valleys. Notice that Paul says he's in great joy in the Lord. What usually brings us joy in life? Gifts? Maybe. When the gifts come, our spirits and joys rise. When the valleys come, our joy and spirit descend. Like this. You ever notice that our souls experience changes in emotional weather? One week you're sunny and 75 and prayers are answered, doors are opening. The next week, dust storm or hurricane or tornado. You can't feel God. The news isn't good, and the joy evaporates fast. And here's my question. Are you living like a thermometer or a thermostat? You see, they both appear the same, but the thermometer only reflects the climate up when life is up and down when life is down. Thermostat sets the climate, correct? It holds steady in the heat and the cold. If nothing in your life has changed in the next 90 days, no raise, no fix, no miracle, how content would you be? I mean, we can feel contented if they said, well, we need to extend your program about 4 more weeks. How would you feel about that? Would you be content? Well, I think so. Because you feel like you know you're getting something out of the program, right? Yeah. You see, you can be content regardless. Because he was looking forward to getting out, but well, wait, maybe I'm better off doing another 4 weeks. Yeah. Be honest. Would your soul rise and fall with the temperature of your week? Paul's gratitude is God-centered, not gift-centered. Paul's joy was vertical before it was horizontal. He rejoiced in the Lord, not merely in the gift. The giver is his joy before the gift arrives. Paul rejoices greatly in the Lord because the Philippians have renewed their concern for him. He acknowledges that they had always been concerned but lacked the opportunity to show it before. This emphasizes the mutual affection between Paul and the Philippian believers. The word concern is more than a sentiment. It's a mindset that moves to action. Gospel partnership, having a grateful heart, is a choice. It's a choice to focus on the gratitude before it leads to change in circumstance, such as in Philippians 4:4 and in James 1:17. But let's look at that Philippians 4:4 passage real quick. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. We even have a hymn in the hymn book, I think, that reflects that. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. A grateful heart recognizes the quiet timings of God. Delays aren't abandonments. There are many things that we can't allow to block our ability to possess a grateful heart. I'll repeat that. There are many things that we can allow to block our ability to possess a grateful heart. What are those? Entitlement. I'm owed. You ever felt that? I'm owed. They owe me this. Well, are you? Really? Or comparison. They got more. I only got this. They got more than that. Oh, man. Or cynicism. It won't last. Yeah, the older couple just got married. They say they're happy. It won't last. Right? You didn't get it. They got it. But it won't last. No. Back to our thermostat or thermometer thought. A grateful heart sets the climate. Circumstances no longer set the temperature. The grateful heart is in control. A grateful heart in the valleys is a choice. It's an act of faith. It declares that God is still present and active even when life feels barren. Gratitude tills the soil of the heart. Now God grows deep roots through all kinds of weather. Let's move to verses 11 through 12. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everything and all things I have learned, both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. Again, Philippians 4:11 and 12. Which brings us to contentment in every season. Every season. Now, I'm not just talking about spring, summer, fall, winter. I'm talking about the seasons of life. When you first got married, sure. If you have your first child, absolutely. When the company sends you on away from your family for a month. How contented are you then? What happens if you lose a child? Are you still content? See, verses 11 and 12 highlight Paul's personal contentment. He's in jail, chained, not just in the cells, but he's chained to a soldier, an armed soldier that could kill him. He explains that his gratitude is not rooted in desperate need, for he has learned to be content in all circumstances, whether in need or in plenty. So let's look back briefly and dig at the word content. The Greek term, which we translate as content, was a significant concept. In Stoic philosophy, it's used to describe an ideal, wise person who passively accepted circumstances, believing that they possessed all their inner resources to cope impassively with life. However, Paul's understanding of contentment while using this term is distinct from Stoicism. His coping is not apathetic. Instead, it clarifies in Philippians 4:13 that he learned to depend on Christ's strength. Another power. He didn't depend on himself. He declared to everyone he depended on Jesus for that strength, not himself. Paul used this term to express his spiritual maturity and his trust in Christ's sufficiency. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content in any circumstance. Verse 11 exemplifies Christian value of finding contentment in any situation through faith in God. The idea that true sufficiency comes from not only material wealth or external circumstances, but through a deep relationship with God, who provides all that is needed, everything. We do get that confused a lot in our lives, don't we? Our advertising and marketing companies can know how to make us feel insufficient, right? You got everything you need, but yet, man, something inside you, I want more. Why? You got everything you need, right? You just said that. Paul's learning implies a process shaped by both scarcity and abundance. In his travels, they were in scarcity. They ran out of food. They ran out of this. They ran out of that. And the other places, they'd go with generous congregations that load them up with stuff. He had both. Paul says twice, I have learned. This is the language of a student, not a prodigy. The Greek word for learned implies, forgot to put that up there, I have learned. Acquiring knowledge through experience, not just theory. You look back on your life, look at the things that you've learned and when you learned them and how you learned them. Especially the spiritual lessons. What brought them to you? Any and every doubles the scope. Peaks and valleys are both classrooms. The curriculum of contentment. The valleys teach dependence. When Paul was brought low, he learns God's sufficiency. The peaks test humility. When Paul abounded, he learned not to trust in plenty. God uses both the drought and the harvest to train our hearts to rest in Him alone. You ever think about that? Time of year, you got the whole family together. Everybody's laughing, joyous. Gifts are given. God's bringing that to you to learn something. To learn that that gift is from Him, right? Not from yourself. Learn to trust Him and Him alone. From an application standpoint, we need to ask ourselves, what is God teaching me this season? What is He teaching me today? Don't waste the valley by longing for a mountaintop. Paul doesn't say he was always content, but he learned to be content. And you know this if you've read the book of Romans. In Romans 7, he talked about his struggle. His struggle with covetousness. Why didn't I have more? I like that. I like what he's got. He struggled with that. That was his struggle. So he didn't always have that power to be content. He had to learn it. His experience of plenty and want, of being well fed and hungry, were his classrooms. The thought provides us hope. If Paul, a man faced with extreme hardship, had to learn this, so can we. You and me, we can all learn this. Every season, whether a peak or a valley, is an opportunity for us to grow in contentment. The expression learned in the secret translates to a verb and was used in the initiation ceremonies of Greek mystery religions. This vividly conveys that Paul had been thoroughly initiated into life situations where contentment was required. So let's go to those verses 13 and 14. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Nevertheless, you have done well that you have shared in my distress. Philippians 13 and 14. Brings us to our next main point. Contentment is empowered by Christ's strength. Now, verse 13 is a powerful declaration by Paul that explains the source of his contentment in all circumstance, a concept he introduces in Philippians 10 through 12. The context is vital to understanding what Paul was saying here. and what he's not saying. This passage tends to be very abused, especially verse 13. But rather because of lack of understanding. Paul isn't talking about winning championships or smashing personal goals. He's talking about enduring every season. Verses 11 and 12, with unshakable contentment. See, he's giving you the why. Philippians 4:13 is not a trophy verse for personal ambition. It's a trust verse for faithful endurance in scarcity and or abundance. The all things refers to all circumstances that God calls us to walk. And we walk in many, don't we? Through whatever scarcity, abundance, hardship, or blessing. This is not self-empowerment, it's Christ empowerment. With the proper context in mind, we can now understand that the phrase all things means the phrase all things in this context was specifically referring to the varying circumstances of life. You're going to face everything, pretty much. I hope not some of the extreme things of this world can send your way, but at least bits of everything. Sadness, depression, joy, happiness, abundance, lack of. Paul has just described in Philippians 4:12 such as experienced humble means or prosperity, being filled or going hungry, having abundance or suffering need. We're going to have bits of all those things in our lives. The Greek verb translated I can do is a symbol for power, highlighting an inner power that is exerted, and it emphasizes the power is not inherent in Paul, but given to him. The nature of empowerment we receive from Jesus is not a borrowed strength, it's an infused strength. My daughter Rebecca, she was into, I think she still does it from time to time, but she does this, she takes water, just, like the stuff you buy, and then she takes some sort of fruit or something and infuses that into the water, to flavor it. Instead of using the Kool-Aids and that kind of stuff, it's supposedly healthier and all that. And it does put a little bit of flavor in there. But that's the same thing can be done with our spirits. It can be infused with God's Spirit. We already have the Holy Spirit, right? But we can get infused with what God's mind is and what His mind is for us. But we need to be thinking how we need to accept these things. The Greek word for strengthen needs to be empowered from within. Paul's ability to find contentment doesn't come from his own willpower, it comes from Christ's strength. Christ infuses that strength with us as we walk. It's not about removing the valley, but empowering you to get through it. How does Christ's strength show up in our lives? Persevering obedience, take the next step when feelings lag, peace in pressure, freedom to receive and to give help. When we're in the valley, we don't have to muster up to our own strength or positivity. We can tap into the supernatural peace of Christ, knowing that His power is made perfect in our weakness. The intriguing thing about God's power is that God's strength begins where our self-sufficiency ends. When you've run to your limits, you can't do any more. That's when God can really step in and show off what He can do for you. All we have to do is let Him. This is a kingdom principle. When I am weak, then I am strong. 2 Corinthians 12:10 says, Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Again, 2 Corinthians 12:10. Admitting our inability is the gateway to experiencing His ability. Imagine a cordless power tool. You got one of those little saws, that you can saw through metal and stuff, and you can go and, boy, you can be a destructor, right? Destruct things so you can build, right? But the saw doesn't have a battery put in there. There's no drive. It's all design, but no drive. But all of a sudden, then you grab the battery, you plug it in, and suddenly it can cut, or if it's a drill, it can build, it can hammer, depending on what the tool is. It's got power. We are the tool. Christ is the power source. Without Him, you can do nothing. John 15:5 tells you that. With Him, you can do all that He calls you to do. Paul's life reminds us that the valleys are not detours from God's plan. They are part of the plan. They're part of the path. In every season, he's learned that contentment is not found in changing circumstances, but in an unchanging Christ. Gratitude has anchored his heart. Experience trained his soul, and in Christ's strength carried him through. So when he peaks and valleys fade and the shadows fall, remember, you don't have to escape the valley to thrive in it. You only have to learn to lean on the one who walks through it with you. And in Him, you will have all that you need. So here's something to take home with you. Contentment isn't about what's around you. It's about who's within you. I'm going to say that again. Contentment isn't about what's around you. It's about who's within you. So, contentment isn't about what's around you. It's about who's within you. Whatever your need this morning, will you come as we stand and sing the song of invitation?